All right, a beautiful Friday afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Trifactor Engage's Breakthrough in Action podcast. My name is Elle. I am the chairwoman of Trifactor Engage. And for those of you who are not familiar, we just launched Breakthrough in Action, which is our interactive workshop series, but also initiative to bring all our different members of our global network of health professionals and connect them to our community so that we create a really firm foundational support system, especially during this time. As we'll learn through the series, that community support and connection is actually the key indicator to resilience. So today I am super stoked to introduce you to a dear friend of mine. We have a lot of very common friends. You know, we all enjoyed a lot of different things, especially with the practice. But one thing that him and I have in common is how we got into the practice and how we used to live, you know, the life that was so busy doing, striving that we forgot to actually simply be. And we're looking forward to sharing you this story. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, my good friend, Nick, Mr. Daez.
Hey, Elle, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. How are you? What's your reality, mate? What you doing?
Life's pretty good. I mean, like it's slower than usual. My days start at like 10:30 in the morning. I mean, I usually sleep late, but it's nice. I teach yoga, meditation in the morning. You know, I take my time during the day. I paint, I work out, I write, I watch a movie. I mean, it's a good life. And in the evening, I'll teach another class. So it's a really nice routine, honestly. Like it's I think it's been the most ideal in a really long time, to be honest.
Oh, wow. So this is actually, you know, it's bringing you back to home base, bringing you back to a routine that you actually want to sustain.
100%. Like
Isn't that
there's
funny
no
how
rush.
now we're just, you know, everyone's forced to, you know, slow down a little bit, and yet we're still finding ways to be super busy. You know,
Yeah.
you're contacting friends or people in your network and be like, okay, so what are you doing during these lockdowns? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm busier than ever, blah, 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 blah. Because, you know, there's this constant flux of, especially for, you know, a culture scheme that is so, you know, focused on doing and achieving and striving and progressing. All of a sudden we're, you know, forced to reinvent ourselves. So now we're even like on double time. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Because I don't know what tomorrow looks like.
100%.
And I don't know, do you ever find those moments, Nick, where, you know,
All
obviously
the
we have
time.
practice, but that's a tool, you know?
No, all the time. I mean, like, even if I describe my day, I mean, those the in betweens, which is most of the day, I'm constantly thinking, okay, like, what can I do today? Like, that's gonna boost my productivity. That's gonna make me feel like I accomplished a lot of things.
Mhm.
And even when I'm honestly, more often than not, when I'm like trying to chill and like watch a film on Netflix, at the back of my head, I'm thinking of like, what should I be doing? What am
Yeah.
I gonna do? I mean, this is because we're wired that way. I mean, coming from such a fast-paced lifestyle, even like during this whole shift into wellness, I still feel bad. I feel guilty when I don't give it my all, you know, like 110% all the time. And it's a challenge. It's a work in progress. And I can only just, you know, catch myself when I can and just try to adjust, try to accept. But it's always there. I mean, I think that's a big part of my personality as well. I do like being productive. I do like being busy to the brim, you know,
Yes.
like
Yes.
overwhelmed busy.
That's a funny thing you should say that, actually, because there's a beautiful book by Tara Brach called Radical Acceptance, and she talks about the state of busyness, the state of wanting to achieve and striving and earning and progressing, and how that state can be, you know, ambitious and beautiful and inspiring, but it can also be very dangerous, because not because of the action, but because what the intention we have with that action is. And
Yeah.
I think we've both, you know, experienced what it's like to do all those things, the striving,
Yeah.
but the intent behind that striving was actually, I need to prove myself.
Exactly.
I need to show that I'm sufficient,
Yeah.
that I did a good job. I need to do that. Otherwise I'm in trouble, because there's
Right.
doubts that I have that. And then to shift fast forward to having the intentions to still do the striving and working, but the source of that being, actually, I accept myself, everything that I come with, you know, the kinks and, you know, the beauties and the imperfections, and the fact that, you know, I'm always changing, I'm always learning, and I accept myself for that. And I have so much to offer. And as a result of having so much to offer, I'm passionate. And then I do the striving. So it's like, you can have the same result, but it's just a matter of like, it's so tricky depending on which side of the coin you are, how it can be very dangerous.
It really is. And I mean,
So
I
why
feel
do we have that? Why are we always thinking that we need to strive and progress rather than just completely be accepting of where we are?
I think it's a cultural thing too. I mean, like the Philippines and, you know, we're influenced by a lot of Western, especially like the States, you know, and we don't really have a European mindset of work-life balance. Like it's difficult because it's very, I think it's generational, it's ancestral, it's cultural. And it's like, I mean, to rewire that part of your consciousness is really hard. I mean, I think I've been trying to tell myself, you got to accept that this is going to be a constant struggle to the end.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think knowing that doesn't help sometimes, but I think that it's just catching yourself, you know, when you're in it and you can find a way to pivot even just a bit. I think that sense of awareness is what matters the most.
Absolutely. I think that's I'm going to pick off just from there when you say this, that sense of awareness. And obviously we've discussed, we're going to be talking about mindfulness and how this practice has, you know, changed our life and continue to change our life. And when we talk about self-awareness, you know, a lot of the times we go through so much of our life thinking that we are aware or that we're in control of our actions, let alone, you know, then we realize they're all habits. And then we are actually habitual creatures. So Nick, how does being a habitual creature who is not mindful, someone who's swayed by their emotions, who is, you know, led by what the thoughts that come in and they're impulsive with that way, how does operating from that system affect our well-being?
You know, it's funny. Like maybe a couple of years ago, I was still sort of in the deep into directing, you know, and running a company. So it was like there wasn't enough hours in the day to get, you know, work done. So like it was constant chasing, constant trying to like you know um sort of like fight fires, but like, you know, working on multiple projects at the same time. So you're spread very thinly. And I could feel in hindsight, like my nerves were shot because like there was just so much input, so much stimulation, so much pressure that like I didn't really know what I was feeling anymore. I was just in a constant state of like shock and bewilderment. And I remember I I went to a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, and she specialized in nerves. And then she was like basically assessing me using a rod on my palms, on my feet, and then she was saying, your life is too fast paced. You can't your body can literally can't keep up.
Yeah.
That's why you're getting all this pain, you
Yes.
know, and all this like fogginess. And then she was like, you just need to slow down. And for me, I was like, I'm trying, you know, but what can I do? Like, this is already me trying. And I think I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I was that guy. You know, I was a guy who was just doing way too much, and I didn't have a means to ground, to center. Like, I would go to the gym, but like I felt like it actually maybe even aggravated it a bit more, because I was just like, you know, like letting off like that primal energy and kind of just building on it instead of kind of like replenishing. And I think that was I didn't know it at the time. I just felt like I just gotta keep like going, you know, and don't give up, because like if you give up, this will fall apart.
Yeah.
So and it was a scarcity mindset because I didn't think I had enough time. It was also like in the sense that very fear based. Like I was scared that I didn't trust that things would fall into place.
Yeah.
You know, and I just felt like I needed to be in control all the time. So that's really difficult. I feel like that's gonna catch up with you eventually. You will go through a meltdown. You will like burn out, and it's just a matter of time. And sometimes you don't want it to be a heart attack. You don't want it to be like a mental breakdown, but like it usually leads to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and this is something that we've discussed not too long ago, was, the whole sense of the breakdown. I mean, at this point, I think everyone's aware that, before we even started the lockdown, 1 out of 4 people are usually likely to experience a psychotic episode, or, a mental disorder or condition because of the stressful, stimuli and situations that we're in. And so that's a lot of people for us to not be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so we have this stigma against, mental health, or when you say mental health, it automatically gets people, on guard. And yet we're constantly in this state of fight or flight and panic that we're too afraid to address, that side of it. And we don't like the idea of a nervous breakdown or a panic attack. Yeah. But, as with your story and with my story as well, when your nervous system is shutting down and your doctor is telling you to slow down, that's one of those bam, wake up calls. And sometimes, you don't want to get to that point. You don't want to get to the whole breakdown. And sometimes it's necessary because we are so bloody stubborn that we don't actually see it. We just goes to show we create our own realities, right? It's like, no, I'm just fine. I haven't slept in 3 days. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
The stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, because we're afraid that if we stop, we have, as you said, no control of what's going to happen. It's uncertain. And if it's uncertain, that makes us worry. Am I going to be enough for when that uncertainty comes? Am I going to be able to survive? And at the end of the day, it's the self-doubt.
Yes.
And it's just inherent in us. So when you mentioned, your story when you were in that state of constantly on edge, strung out with your work, and, you were recommended to slow down. What part of your journey brought you to the practice of mindfulness, and how did you understand, where the root of that busyness came from? Was it, like you said, a striving? Was it a previous conditioning that you had, or was it just how you've always remembered yourself to be?
Yeah, no, I guess connecting it to my childhood. I was raised by very conservative parents, and that expected a lot from all of us. They wanted us to do our best, and always, if it wasn't an A, it wasn't great. You owe it to yourself to do your best. So that was sort of it became a very deep core value. And at the same time, I went to a Jesuit private school, so it was really competitive. It was always kind of it was ingrained in our psyche that to do more, for the greater glory of God, ad majorem de gloriam, that kind of thing. And that's imagine your whole, I was in Ateneo for wow, almost 18 years. Wow. That's a long time. And you have that kind of conditioning. Plus the fact that, all my friends, even if they weren't all from Ateneo, they all came from similar backgrounds as well. They were all very driven. They were all very ambitious.
Yeah.
And I admit that even if that was ingrained, I kind of went the other way. From high school to the first 2 years of university, I didn't give a shit. It was really, I was a hedonist in the purest form. It was just, I'm going to do not even the bare minimum. I'm going to find a way to cruise and just pass all my subjects, and maybe not even pass my subjects. It was more I want to go out. I want to get
out of the mold.
Yeah, I want to meet girls. I just want to have fun. That's all I cared about.
Yeah.
And, life happened, and I realized that the cycle wasn't sustainable. I knew where it was headed. I was going to probably be in a dead end job and be super unhappy, just drinking myself to death. But when I realized that I hit rock bottom, because of a girl, ironically, it was
always a girl.
It was heartbreak, and I ended up moving to the US actually. So I lived in North Carolina for a year, and that was sort of the rites of passage for me. I was only 18 then, so I was super young, and I'd never worked before. I never had a real job. So like I remember my first job, I was like cleaning toilets. I was bussing tables, and my first day I ended at 3 a.m. because I didn't know how to clean. And the manager was telling me, you gotta like, I'm gonna have to let you go if you can't like speed it up. I'm like,
No.
and it was just really like it was so overwhelming but so defining. Like it taught me that you gotta let go of that sense of entitlement.
Yes.
You're just zero. I mean, we're all zeros, and you gotta put in the work. And that really that it was so hard. It did break me, in the process. But like when I went back to the Philippines, I was a different person.
Hmm.
And that's when I realized it. Like when I didn't file for an LOA when I was in Ateneo, and like I was basically AWOL. So they were like, if you want to go back, you got to get like a 4.0 GPA from another school for like basically a perfect GPA, and they're gonna think about it. They're gonna let you back into Ateneo. So I was like,
Then we'll think about it.
yeah, they'll think about it. So I was like,
Rest
well,
your butt,
whatever.
and then we'll think about it.
Yeah, right. So I was like,
Thanks.
my ego was just crushed,
Yeah.
and but that led to me working really, really hard. At the same time, I had a job. Like I wanted to have a job. I wanted to fill my time, and I made it back to Ateneo. Fast forward like 2 years, right from my senior year, I started my company, my video production company, and also happened very organically. It wasn't like oh, here's a business plan, I'm gonna set this out. It basically found me. It taught me how to become an entrepreneur. It taught me how to be a director. Like this company was sort of like my MBA.
Yeah.
And I fucked up a lot. But at the same time had amazing times. I did it for almost a decade, directing. And but that life was at the same time high stress, doing multiple things at the same time, and nothing was ever really done. You just had to keep going, and that's all I knew, and I loved it. Honestly, it was intoxicating. I was young. I was only like, I started at 22, so like like for the first 8 years, it was like let's keep going until I couldn't.
Yeah.
And my relationship suffered a lot because I was married to my work first,
Yes.
and I had to learn the hard way when I was married and my marriage ended,
Yeah.
because she was also my business partner. She was my life partner, and because I was so like deep into that I guess that hustle mode, like it ruined a lot of things. It ruined things very slowly. Like it really seeped in, and that's what led me to I guess the spiritual path. Like I was so desperate. The drugs weren't working, the alcohol wasn't working. I was like, I need something else. And I remembered a cousin of mine, and I just reached out to her because I knew she was into like meditation. She was like a hippie, and she was like, come to this session. It was like a Hindu gathering, like a Hindu meditation, and I was the only guy, and it was amazing. And I was after that, like a lot of the women were telling me, you gotta join this Kundalini yoga class. There's this lady in Forbes, she's American, she's just, it's a beautiful space, just come. As I went the next day, and something powerful happened to me. Like it was a very visceral experience. Like something really took over, like from the get-go, like something bigger than any high I've experienced, something like, I don't know, like I guess it was a supernatural experience, to be honest. And I was hooked. Like it just was like a drug. I was doing it every day.
What were you doing that invoked that state of being, or were you in the middle of a certain practice in class, and how did that feeling feel like? Was there an affirming thought that governed or explained what that
Yeah,
feeling
no,
was?
I remember it clearly. Like I remember we were doing like a moving meditation, and we were chanting. And I remember my eyes were rolled up to my forehead, to my brow point, and I remember just being like consumed by this wave of ecstasy. Like it was like an orgasm over an orgasm over an orgasm, and like just
Everyone's like, where can I access this kind of meditation?
yeah, it was orgasmic, to be honest. Like it was greater than any high, greater than any feeling I've encountered. Like even more powerful than love, or maybe it was love, but like it was just overwhelming, and I never thought that you could feel that way. And how could I not chase that? And but in that pursuit, it led me to an even deeper rabbit hole, you know, of this like this really deep journey, and it's still until now it's still ongoing. Like it hasn't failed to amaze me, and I'm a very fickle-minded person, and this thing has really surprised me.
Wow. So, I mean, if you're already used to being in that state of mind, it must be something that, completely catches or turns you, 360 degrees.
It altered my chemistry for sure. Like I feel like something really happened that it added like another component that had to be satisfied, you know,
Like it
like
broaden your awareness
it did.
in different reaches. And can you remember what centering, was there a centering thought to that, emotion? Was it like an epiphany, or was it simply sensation?
No, there was definitely like an epiphany, like mentally, like I felt like this feels right, you know, in my head. This you gotta follow this. Like it doesn't make sense. Like I
Yeah.
remember I left my company. Like I mean, like I basically just said I'm leaving. I'll be back when I'm back. And I went to India. I went to New Mexico. Like whatever, man. Like I don't give a shit. Like just fucking. If you want to buy me out, buy me out. But they didn't buy me out. So like it was very selfish, very reckless. But like I guess in my head, I was listening to my gut because it was too strong. It was too loud. Like it would bother me. There would be times when I would like, okay, I got time to go back home, but then I would get pulled again. You know, I'd try to direct like a project, and in the back of my head, I'm like, what am I doing this? Like, why am I still doing it? It doesn't feel good anymore. And
Yeah.
it was a really rough, very rocky path. Like until now, I mean, it's not as strong as before, but
Yeah.
I mean, when your identity is linked to what you do, which is me as an entrepreneur and as a director, that's really difficult.
That messes with.
Knowing if you're good enough, if you'll ever be better than that,
Yeah.
or you'll ever be somebody else. Like that was pressing for years.
Especially now when, so many people, myself included, have lost their jobs because,
Yeah.
of the current situation. And so when you lose the environment of where you're able to, show your strength and excel, you think that by losing that environment, you lose the parts of you that made that environment
Yeah.
special. So if I lose my job, I lose my security. I lose, my confidence because I gain confidence by excelling. I lose maybe I won't be respected because I won't, people that respected me because of my job. And then you think, well, where did all those things come from? The respect, the confidence, the security. Did they not come from, your personal attributes? And because you did or completed a certain job, you were what contributed to that security, to that, confidence, to that respect. And then you realize, oh, so it wasn't actually the job. It was just me all along.
Yeah.
But that's,
Exactly.
it's threatening. When you take it away, it's
It
just,
is.
oh,
But that's when you realize. I mean, I there were a lot of moments when I was like, in my head I was broke, but I knew I wasn't broke because I still had the company. But I felt like shit because like my bank account was just like dwindling, and you know, like I won't lie, I didn't feel liberated. I didn't feel like, oh, like I'm embracing this like poverty. Like I felt like shit. Like I really felt like, what am I doing with my life? Like now I gotta go back. Now I gotta like rebuild my life again. But it took a while, but like I think now I've come to terms, I've accepted, not come to terms, I've accepted that this is something like teaching is something I love right now, and I want to embrace it like completely, you know. And it took a really long time to get here, especially the unlearning was difficult, the rewiring of the
yeah.
belief system.
That actually brings me to the part that I want to ask you to uncover. For those of us in the audience who really don't know much about mindfulness, we've heard about people sitting silent on a mat, or people saying certain words and certain sounds and practices and rituals, but they don't know how it applies, the science behind it. They don't know why the breath and the mindfulness practice and movement and sound come together in a way that broadens people's awareness so that they not only experience life in a completely different frequency, but they also live life in a different frequency. You see the same two people going through the exact same hardship, you know, and one person is looking at it half full and the other is looking half empty, which means there must be shifts in perspectives. Because if they have the same things, what makes them different? So for someone who's not familiar with, you know, the practice, how does that make sense?
You know, for me, like I've had a lot of conversations with very cerebral people, like scientists and businessmen, and I like asking them like, how do you stay centered? Like, how do you try to like just let it all go? And a lot of them, you know, they may not call it meditation, but they do have some, they do make an active effort to take time to pause,
Mm.
like to reflect, like maybe not even meditate, but to reflect. And I find that for them, it comes in different ways. Some of them work out, some of them, you know, like just walk or like paint or travel. But I've realized that it took me a while to kind of connect the dots in the sense that that's the meditative ritual that you need. You know, the discernment, the quiet, the accepting the noise. You know, like these are, you know, like I feel like I'm only going to compare myself to like who I was before. Like working out wasn't an outlet. It was more like pressure because I wanted to look good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I didn't want to look. I wanted to make sure I was like jacked. You know, like but
For different reasons, so it wasn't the
yeah,
same.
it wasn't really for health. And like when I fast forward now to the way when I meditate, it's not a chore. Like it's really like I want to do it because like I know the effects of it. I mean, maybe there is no actually more often than not there is resistance to do it because like your body just kind of wants to laze around, you know, or like just do something else. And
Yes.
but I know that it's like eating your vegetables. Sometimes it doesn't taste good, but sometimes you just got to eat it, you
Yeah.
know, because it's good for you.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the thing, you know, being like knowing what the good hacks are. And that's like your good habits. Like if you like work out every day and are like, I was just talking to a friend before this call, like she was like, you got to realize that having a routine balances your energy, you know, like
Yes.
it balances your energy, but at the same time creates a lot more energy because
Mhm.
it's constantly moving. And I think that's the same thing. If you have a lot of good habits, those just compound. But if you're stressed and your go-to is like to just drink or like wallow, and those things compound too. And that's where the meltdown happens, which is um awful but amazing at the same time because they are sometimes the most necessary
Yeah.
wake-up calls.
And you don't go back because you know you see a completely different light. You're like, how do you go back from here? I like what you said about balance. I think it's because more than anything, you know, it's not like we're saying don't be busy and
Yeah,
don't want to achieve amazing things. You know what? If that is in your heart, go
go
for it.
for
You
it.
know, work your heart out. But there needs to be balance at the end of the day. Just like, you know, with balance, it's not just your life isn't just made out of, you know, your vocation, your mental health, your physical health and fitness, your relationships, your play time, or the time where you do nothing, you don't think, you know.
Yeah,
And the science behind it is, you know, obviously your sympathetic nervous system is constantly being used, and your parasympathetic nervous system, which is supposed to bring you back to baseline, you know, is non-existent. And so you get strung out, and then all of a sudden that strung out affects your physical health, and you know, the way your body just doesn't work as efficiently as possible. But when you balance with the, you know, healthy habits, you're not only able to balance out, you know, the stress, but you actually produce, like what you said, you know, you're adding and multiplying on top of the other. You're producing all this extra, what I like to call it's like peripheral vantage resources in
yep,
our brains that, like, you know, when you're really pissed off at someone who just cut in front of you, you're so blinded by that rage that you
yeah,
can't think. You just you don't think logically. It's like you're completely impaired. And yet when you're playing and you're completely in the moment and you're full of joy, that's when you're so creative. That's when you're, you know, more in flow. That's when you're actually more productive.
yeah, exactly. No,
But the
it's really
balance is
exactly.
necessary.
I think the like you mentioned creative energy, and I love how like in Kundalini yoga, like it's a science, you know, like they always talk about the spine. And if they say if you have a very flexible spine, like not only does it affect you mentally and emotionally, like that's where you get into the flow state. You know, like you like if you're and it makes sense too. Like if you're flexible, you're able to flow through,
Yeah.
you know, different
There's no
challenges.
tension. At the end of the day, like stress in the head is like, you know, tension in the body. It's the same thing. It impairs our
Exactly.
fluidity.
Exactly. I mean, it's very when I think about it, it's actually very intuitive. You know, like being aware of your body, being in the body. Where are you tight? You know, where do you need more space? What feels like tense? I mean, you know, I that's what I love about like Eastern medicine and yoga. Like it's everything's connected. You know, when you eat well, when you sleep well, when you think well, it's just you know, it's just all
Exactly.
wires you know, like stem together and you just knowing that it makes it just, you know, it puts a lot of things in perspective.
Yeah.
It really does.
Now that can be like, so we talked about how all of these amazing things that this practice, you know, can bring together, not only to balance, you know, the busyness and, you know, your long hours and the stressful situation that is, you know, this pandemic, but the fact that it actually opens your mind, you tap into this higher frequency of thinking, and you're just more free and in your body and connected to be your authentic self rather than, you know, being
Yeah.
clouded by the self-limiting beliefs that you usually see through. All of this, having said that, even though it is scientifically and evidence-based, you know, it's all backed where you see brain scans
Yeah.
of people before and after a mindfulness practice. You know, as you see people's blood pressure go down, you see, you know, their heart rate variability increase because there's more balance. This is, you know, just hard fact now. But that doesn't make up for the fact that, okay, I accept this is true, but it seems so like I can't see it or move it or touch it. So I don't really, it's so vague. How do I rewire my brain
I
again?
get you. I get
How
you.
am
It
I
is
supposed to do this like impossible thing that only gods can do? Control myself?
yeah,
Who?
exactly, right? It's an old I mean, honestly, the old version of me would be thinking the exact same thing. Like, come
Yeah.
on. Like that's
It's
hippie.
like,
It's
yeah,
hippie.
really,
I'm not
really.
gonna be like some like demigod, but you know, it's like but you know, for me, I mean, I am pretty skeptical. I used to be very very skeptical before, but I think you gotta be open to new experiences. Like I think for me, like going to an staying in an ashram in India. I mean, I went because I followed my friend.
Yeah.
My teacher like would stay in an ashram, and she was like, "You're gonna stay with me, right?" I'm like, "I guess."
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, it didn't make sense to me,
Yeah.
but like at the
You
same
tried,
time,
but you tried
sorry,
it. But you
but I
tried.
tried, and it
I,
opened my eyes to a whole new world. And you know, I was in the very materialistic world. I was deep in that, but when you get exposed to things that are like that feels like a different planet,
yeah.
that provokes you. And I think
Mhm.
that's what I realized. And it's sort of like the mantra of the
Yeah.
practice. It's to poke and provoke. And that stayed with me. Like you gotta put
Yeah.
yourself in situations that are gonna be uncomfortable. Because
Yeah.
like I love saying this to my students, like you know, when it's starting to get uncomfortable, that's when you're starting to grow.
Yes.
That's when you're starting to work. And
Yes.
if you resist that point all the time, then you're gonna be labeling your growth moments as awful moments.
And I think it's just because we have that perspective. You know, it's like the Stoic philosophy, like welcoming every uh, happenstance of life,
Yeah.
even, you know, the moments that just feel like, uh, because knowing that this is somehow something that you can pivot towards your growth. But like you said, I love what you said about, you know, when you're shaking, that's where growth is. You know, when you're trying to balance and you're shaking,
Yep,
the shaking
exactly.
is the good. You know,
It really
embrace the
is.
shaking. When the
And
muscles
physically, it
have
is.
delayed
Yeah,
onset muscle, you know, syndrome, that's the good. You know, when you're playing video games and you see all the bad guys, that means you're close to the prize.
exactly. Exactly.
And that is something that mindfulness allows us to just shift the lens through which we experience our day. Because if we constantly set these expectations that something that doesn't necessarily feel, you know, pleasurable is bad,
Yeah.
then that completely, sets the world in this gray view, because we are going to experience hardships. it's a good thing. That's how we grow. We were biologically and genetically mapped to evolve and adapt. You cannot adapt and evolve if there's no pressure.
Exactly.
And this is a hard lesson to accept.
Super hard. I mean,
Because even if I want to
hours.
accept it in my mind, when it happens, when, you know, the guy cuts me off, or when I mess up, or when my expectations are not met, or I lose my job, or there's a lockdown, when these outside variables that I cannot control happen, they sweep off my expectations, and all of a sudden it's uncertain. This is familiar. It's uncertain. I cannot control tomorrow.
Yeah. Exactly.
What am I going to do? I'm not enough.
Yeah. That's where it kicks in, like the scarcity mindset. And I think, I mean, for me, because the pandemic has heightened the emotions and the thoughts, I think that like you need to, for personally, I feel like you really need to be in the struggle, like that back and forth of like, I got it, or no, I don't got it. No, I'm not in control. I'm in control. That shuffling is where the growth happens, you know. And some days, you know, that higher self will win. So other days that, you know, that egocentric crybaby wins. Like it's just a dance, and you gotta accept the dance. You know that sometimes you're gonna lose, sometimes you're gonna win, and you know, like that's the thing. A dance is imperfect, but when you look at it from like a macro perspective, it's like that was my life, and it was beautiful. All the ups and downs, you know.
You don't watch a beautiful movie and see that there is no challenge in front of the protagonist.
Yeah.
The beauty is in the struggle, because the struggle is where the breakthroughs come from.
Exactly.
But again, it's always, we have to be able to be willing to put ourselves in uncertain situations and scenarios, to the things that, because at the end of the day, I love this quote, and it says that find the things that you are certain of, and that's where you stop learning and growing. Yeah. And at the end of the day, when we think we have an idea, we already know our realities are completely twisted in our heads to protect our, our ego. So rather than saying, oh, you know, this isn't for me, like what you said, it's just that step of bravery of putting yourself out there, still being skeptical, because you don't want to, you want to make sure that you are responsible of the things that you accept as true, but to be open to trying it, because it is impossible to expect change and still do all of the same things.
Yeah.
We have to be intentional about seeking that. So Nick, what practical ways, I mean, how does it start? How, if I'm sitting at home and I'm like, all right, you sold me. How do I do this? How do I start? You know, I'm locked down. I don't have teachers. Obviously, we'll tell them how to get in touch with you. But how can people start the practice in a simple way right now?
So for me, it's I always tell my students the same thing, because it's what I did personally. Like, I mean, I only got into meditation 7 years ago. That's not a long time.
Yeah.
And until now, I would not say that I was like a master at it. And I always think it's all about that very tiny step forward. And when I mean tiny, I mean like a minute tiny. And like I always tell my students, when you're beginning a meditative practice, like you have a minute in the morning. You have a minute before you get out of bed. Like stay in bed, don't even go out. And you also have another minute in bed before you go to sleep. So for me, it's simple. Like you can even lie down. Like that's how easy it's gonna be. You lie down, you close your eyes, and you breathe. You count. You count each breath. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the nose. Just count your breaths, 1 to 60, or just notice that I'm just breathing. I'm just breathing. Not even add a mantra, nothing. Just watch your breath for a minute when you wake up and when you sleep. And then after a week, stop completely. Go along your usual routine and then see the difference. Because for me, it's that. Like there has to be some like experimentation, like a test. Like because like I said, I was skeptical. And this, I realized that life is just so much like easier because you're used to that space. You're used to that 1 minute of like, you know, trying to concentrate, and you realize that you have the power to slow down your thought process by your breath, and at the same time by your intention.
Yes.
you know, by just sort of like just allowing things to contract, finding the insights in every moment, you know, and it takes practice. That's the thing. That's why they call it the practice. Meditative practice, mindfulness practice, yoga practice. It's not a pursuit of perfection. It's just constant practice. And I think it's such a simple idea, but it's literally the freaking like headline.
Well, it's not easy.
Yoga practice. Like, so you gotta practice, because when you
Yeah.
stop, that's when it becomes hard again, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, that's why I love when my teachers would always tell me, like, when you're starting to feel the burn, you know, when you're starting to feel like it's getting noisy, like that's the turning point already. You can't you know, when, especially when you don't want to do it, when you don't want to meditate,
That's
all the
especially
more you gotta meditate. Like, that's the
that's the
irony of
tell.
it,
That's
you
the
know. It's
tell.
such a mind, it's such a mind fuck, but you know, it's, if you, when you do it, you will feel better. That's the thing. It's like brushing your teeth. I mean, if you don't brush your teeth are
Yeah.
gonna go bad. I mean, it's as simple as that.
And it's like what you said, if you do it, then you are going to feel better. And it's the whole shift at the end of the day from being habitual or impulsive, meaning that we are led by emotions and thoughts, which we actually understand that emotions and thoughts are not us. They're sometimes just random little,
Yeah.
thought bubbles that come up because the brain's put two and two together, and and that's fine. But being able to like separate yourself from that, and not being always swept away in that, and to then transfer from that habitual state to being intentional by taking that 1 minute to actually pause and ask yourself, how do I want, how do I want to show up in this situation, rather than just showing up, but being mindful. Because a lot of the times, we have that inner resistance because, you know, we know what we want to be, we know what we want to do, we know what we want to give and achieve, and it's good, we have our values. But then why don't we act that way? Why don't we think that way? Why don't we feel that way? I want to. And so that there's this like battle between, who I want to be or think I am and how I'm behaving. And because we're so constantly emotionally, habitually, impulsively led. But this practice allows us to say, actually take more ownership of the day. And I love what you said about just trying the baby step. So many times we try too much too fast,
Yeah.
and by that little baby step, it's like anyone can do a minute. But I'm really
Anyone.
excited to see what you guys tell. So please, if you're watching this, take a week. Did you say a week, Nick?
A week.
Take a week to do it. 1 minute in the morning before getting out of bed, and 1 minute before going to sleep when you're in bed.
Yep. Do it in
And
bed. Do it in bed.
in bed, yeah. And you have to be awake.
Yep. You gotta be awake. At least be awake.
And then see it again like a week afterwards without doing it, and then let us know how it feels. Let your friends know how it feels. All right, so Nick, do you have anything? I want to actually pick your brain. I want to see you in action. But before I do that, is there anything else that you want to share about this practice? We mentioned why you got into it. We talked about the need because of the balance, because there's constantly this striving of proving, and this all of a sudden this balance came that showed you to simply slow down and access, other beautiful parts of your brain. We talked about how you recommend, just being patient with yourself in the process. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think for me, like, you gotta chase your highest excitement. Like, I remember in my teacher training, one of my classmates, I was talking to her during break, and she just candidly talked about like her addiction. Like, she struggled with drug addiction, and like, I asked her, how did you overcome it? And she was like, I just chased my highest excitement, and that highest excitement was traveling. And that meant, it was a very extreme example. She said that like she gave up her house and just lived in her car, traveled, the entire west coast in the States, and like it led her to like an alternative way of living, and she met people on the same path, and it led her to Kundalini yoga as well. And I think, like, with that said, that for me, that's powerful, because I feel like we all have addictions, be it food, sex, you know, like overworking, and those come from a deep place. And I think that if you're willing to dive deep into something that can transform that, that can actually reveal why you're driven by these like uh, primal desires, like it's just an amazing thing. And I think that's sort of what keeps me in it. And I hope that if you're not happy, if you're not fulfilled, if you're sad, like ask yourself why. Start there, you know, because like that's when you start digging. That's when you're gonna start getting triggered. You're gonna get annoyed. You're probably gonna be hating yourself for a bit, but at least that's a start, you know, to set things in motion. Because you need that constant progression. If not, life's just gonna keep either putting you in a loop, in a vicious cycle, or it's gonna just suck you down. And it's up to you. We have that choice.
That's beautiful. And I think it's, you know, it's great because you talk about how rather than trying to cover up, and it's so hard to just cover up or suppress, because nothing suppressed ever goes away. And when you try and suppress those, you know, that resistance, that turmoil, that pain or that struggle or that addiction, as you said, with something to just cover it up, it's just going to come back that much stronger. But instead, you cultivate instead something, its counterpart. So if you cultivate instead something that is true to you, your deepest desires, your passions, your excitements, as you said, and that is your true authentic self. When you cultivate that, that flourishes. It's just the fact that those addictions go away is just a manifestation.
It is, yeah, totally. It is.
Excellent.
And I think the one last thing that is for me at the core of the practice is you got to serve other people. You got to help other people, because all your depression, your anxiety, your anger, that disappears when you help.
Yes.
Like that's one of the things that for me was very, very powerful when, you know, doing seva, like selfless service, like volunteering, like, you know, doing things without expecting anything at all. Like there's so much power in that. And if you wonder why you're unhappy, who have you helped out? Who have you talked to? It sounds like lame, or it sounds like, oh, whatever, but hey, there's a reason why these things are cliches, because there's a lot of truth in it. And service is one of the biggest things, I think.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Nick. So as we close this session, I'm going to let Nick's voice be the last thing that you hear. So I'm going to say my thank yous to everyone who are listening to this live, who are listening to this when we launch our channel, and to all the people in our workshop series. You're going to be seeing a lot of Nick throughout different exercises. Thank you so much for coming together. At the end of the day, this is about creating content for you and not for something to entertain us. So please let us know, you know, what part of your journey this resonates with, or if, you know, if there's something that you want to know or need help, or something that you want to share with us. This channel was inspired by the community and for the community. So we thank you so much, guys, for being a part of it. All right, Nick, I'm going to let you do your magic. Do you want to take us through just a simple experience to allow us to understand what mindfulness, or taking that sacred pause, can be like?
For sure. So to start, let's just sit in any comfortable position. Let's make sure your spine is straight, your neck is long. Rest your hands on top of your thighs. You face your palms up, you can rest them down. Just inhale deeply through the nose. Pause the breath gently. Exhale completely. Inhale deeply through the nose. Pause the breath gently. Exhale completely. On the next inhale, set an intention for yourselves. Inhaling deeply. Pause the breath gently. Exhale completely. I want you to just notice the physical sensations on your body. So we're going to scan our body gently from the top of our head. As you move down, just feel that part of your body relax, soften. Move down to your forehead. Gently moving to your ears. Softening your eyes and your cheeks. Relaxing your nose. Softening your tongue and your lips. Just be slow, be gentle and kind to yourselves. As you release your jaw, releasing all that tension around your neck and your throat, allowing your shoulders to melt. Imagine all the muscles along your spine and your back just opening up. Soften your arms, relaxing your wrists and your fingers, feeling all that weight in your chest just drop down. Allow your internal organs and your abdomen to just completely release, soften. Relax your hips and your pelvis. Softening your thighs and your knees. Relaxing your shins and your ankles. Allow your feet and your toes to just relax completely. Inhale deeply through the nose. Pause the breath gently. Exhale completely from the mouth, the sigh. As your body softens more and more, try to gently observe the quality of your thoughts. Just observe as you're just watching your mind from a distance. Gently observe the quality of your emotions. Lightly gazing. Lightly gazing from a good distance. And lastly, observe your physical body. Observe the space. Observe that subtle energy moving through you. It's normal for the thoughts and emotions to come up. Just gently bring it back to the breath. Bring it back to your awareness. Just relax into it. Stay with it. Stay with this pause as a reminder to constantly slow down. Take your time. Allowing things to integrate. Finding the insights in the noise. Just relax. Just be totally in the now. Inhale deeply. Pause the breath gently. Exhale completely. Now very slowly, very gently, flicker your eyes open. There we go. If you guys enjoyed that, that was just 5 minutes. And it's very simple. It's just sitting, accepting, slowing things down. You will get pulled out. You will get distracted. Let's bring it back. That is the practice. The constant harnessing, constant pulling back. Like you just have to accept that. And once you've accepted it, your life's gonna be totally different. Thanks so much, Elle, for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate that.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you everyone
You're
for
welcome.
listening. Everyone have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye.